Chapter 23. Then Jesus said to the crowds and to his disciples, "The scribes and the Pharisees sit on Moses' seat, so do and observe whatever they tell you, but not the works they do, for they preach, but do not practice. They tie up heavy burdens, hard to bear, and lay them on people's shoulders, but they themselves are not willing to move them with their finger. They do all their deeds to be seen by others. For they make their phylacteries broad and their fringes long, and they love the place of honor at feasts, and the best seats in the synagogues, and greetings in the marketplaces, and being called Rabbi by others. But you are not to be called Rabbi, for you have one teacher, and you are all brothers. And call no man your father on earth, for you have one Father who is in heaven. Neither be called instructors, for you have one instructor, the Christ. The greatest among you shall be your servant. Whoever exalts himself will be humbled, and whoever humbles himself will be exalted. But woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For you shut the kingdom of heaven in people's faces. For you neither enter yourselves nor allow those who would enter to go in. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For you travel across sea and land to make a single proselyte, and when he becomes a proselyte, you make him twice as much a child of hell as yourselves. Woe to you, blind guides, who say, "If anyone swears by the temple, it is nothing, but if anyone swears by the gold of the temple, he is bound by his oath." You blind fools! For which is greater, the gold or the temple that has made the gold sacred? And if you say, "If anyone swears by the altar, it is nothing, but if anyone swears by the gift that is on the altar, he is bound by his oath." You blind men! For which is greater, the gift or the altar that makes the gift sacred? So whoever swears by the altar swears by it and by everything on it. And whoever swears by the temple swears by it and by him who dwells in it. And whoever swears by heaven swears by the throne of God and by him who sits upon it. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For you tithe mint and dill and cumin, and have neglected the weightier matters of the law, justice and mercy and faithfulness. These you ought to have done without neglecting the others. You blind guides, straining out a gnat and swallowing a camel. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For you clean the outside of the cup and the plate, but inside they are full of greed and self-indulgence. You blind Pharisee! First clean the inside of the cup and the plate, that the outside also may be clean. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For you are like whitewashed tombs, which outwardly appear beautiful, but within are full of dead people's bones and all uncleanness. So you also outwardly appear righteous to others, but within you are full of hypocrisy and lawlessness. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For you build the tombs of the prophets and decorate the monuments of the righteous, saying, "If we had lived in the days of our fathers, we would not have taken part with them in shedding the blood of the prophets." Thus you witness against yourselves that you are sons of those who murdered the prophets. Fill up, then, the measure of your fathers. You serpents! You brood of vipers! How are you to escape being sentenced to hell? Therefore I send you prophets and wise men and scribes, some of whom you will kill and crucify, and some you will flog in your synagogues and persecute from town to town, so that on you may come all the righteous blood shed on earth, from the blood of righteous Abel to the blood of Zechariah the son of Berechiah, whom you murdered between the sanctuary and the altar. Truly I say to you, all these things will come upon this generation. O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, the city that kills the prophets and stones those who are sent to it! How often would I have gathered your children together, as a hen gathers her brood under her wings, and you were not willing. See, your house is left to you desolate. For I tell you, you will not see me again until you say, Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord.
Matthew 23. This chapter records his burning words. In a few days, the multitude, influenced by these men, would be shouting for his death. Their responsibility and guilt was greatly increased by this warning the Lord gave them as to the true character of their leaders. He began by according to them the place they claimed as the exponents of the law of Moses. Therefore the people were to keep and do the law as they heard it from their lips. Yet they were to carefully avoid taking them as examples. Their lives contradicted the law they proclaimed. They legislated for others without the smallest conscience as to their own obedience. This the Lord stated in verse 4, and it is a very common offense with professional religionists, who love directing other people while having an easy time themselves. Then, in verses 5 to 12, he exposed their love of notice and preeminence. All was for the eye of men. At feasts, the social circle, in synagogues, the religious circle, in markets, the business circle, they wanted the chief place as rabbis and masters. The disciple of Christ is to be the exact opposite of all this, so let us take it deeply to heart. The abasement of such men is only a matter of time. They were supposed to be signposts into the kingdom, but really they were obstructions. They did not enter themselves and hindered others. Moreover, they used their position to rob the poor and defenseless widow, covering up this enormity with the parade of long prayers. Consequently they should receive severer judgment. Long prayers may impress the crowd, but they did not impress the Lord. Let us remember this and avoid them ourselves. We venture to affirm that no one marked by deep desire and really conscious of the presence of God can wander about in a maze of words. As Ecclesiastes 5 verse 2 indicates, his words must be few. Great zeal for the making of proselytes is characteristic of the Pharisaic mind, and the Lord's words in verse 15 expose a remarkable feature of mere proselytism. It reproduces with added emphasis the character of the proselytizers in those who are proselytized. The Pharisees were children of hell, and their converts were the same in a twofold way. This is why there is always a tendency for evil men and seducers to wax worse and worse, until all is ripe for judgment. In verses 16 to 22, the Lord condemns their fanciful teachings. The distinctions they draw between the temple and the gold of the temple, between the altar and the gift upon it, might make the unthinking regard them with awe as possessing very superior minds. In reality their distinctions were purely imaginary and only a proof of their own blindness and folly. So with other matters, much punctiliousness over small things, much negligence as to great things, whether positively, as to what they observed, as in verse 23, or negatively, as to what they refused, as in verse 24. Blind they were indeed, and that type of blindness is all too common today. Verses 25 to 28 expose another pernicious characteristic. They only concerned themselves about external cleanliness, so as to appear well in the eyes of men. They had no concern for the inside, which was open to the eye of God. They were most careful as to possible defilement acquired by contact from without, yet most careless as to defilement which they themselves generated from within. In result they became centers of defilement, and far from acquiring it from others, they diffused it to others. This is a most subtle evil, from any suspicion of which we may well pray to be preserved. Lastly, verses 29 to 33, the Lord charged them with being the murderers of God's prophets. They built tombs for the earlier prophets, since the sting of their words was no longer felt, but they were truly the children of those that had killed them, and, true to the principle of verse 15, they would prove themselves twofold more the children of murder, filling up the sins of their fathers, and ending up without a doubt in the damnation of hell. This passage furnishes us with the most terrible denunciation from the lips of Jesus, of which we have any record. He never said such things to any poor publican or sinner. These hot words were reserved for religious hypocrites. He was full of grace and truth. Grace with truth he extended to the confessed sinners. The searchlight of truth, without mention of grace, was reserved for the hypocrites. So it came to pass that the blood of a long line of martyrs was going to lie at the door of that generation, and now for the last time Jerusalem was having the opportunity of trusting under the wings of Jehovah, who was amongst them in the person of Jesus. Often he would have thus sheltered them as the Psalms bear witness, and often would Jesus have gathered them during his sojourn amongst them, but they would not. Consequently, the beautiful house in Jerusalem, once owned as Jehovah's, was now disowned. It was just their house and desolate, and he who would have filled it was going from them, to be unseen till they should say, Blessed is he that comes in the name of the Lord. They will not say this, as Psalm 118 shows, until that day arrives which the Lord has made, when the stone which the builders refused is become the headstone of the corner.